Darkness. Not the kind you experience when you close your eyes, but something deeper, heavier. A void that swallows sound, light, and reason itself. A single red light flickered in the endless steel corridor, casting long shadows across the reinforced walls. The air was thick, stagnant, humming with an invisible tension. The kind that crawls under your skin and makes your instincts scream at you to run. But nobody ran. Not here. This was Black Site Omega, a prison so secret that even the president had plausible deniability of its existence. A place designed to contain threats that didn't officially exist. And inside Cell 99, bound by gravity locks, electromagnetic restraints, and layers of classified countermeasures, sat something that defied all logic. It wasn't human. No one knew what it was. Not entirely. Not even the highest-ranking officials in the Pentagon. What they did know was that it was dangerous. Prisoner X-99. It had arrived 15 years ago, dragged in chains after an incident in the Nevada desert. Every scientist, every analyst, every general who had come close enough to study it hadn't been the same since. Some had disappeared, some had gone insane, and others, they had simply stopped speaking, as if their minds had been erased. But the most terrifying thing? X-99 had never spoken. Not once. The watch commander. Outside the containment chamber, Commander Ethan Graves stood with his team of elite guards, battle-hardened, expressionless, trained to neutralize any threat on Earth. But tonight they weren't sure if Earth's rules still applied. "Any movement?" Graves asked, gripping his rifle tighter than usual. "Negative, sir," one of the technicians responded, his eyes fixed on the biometric monitors. "No activity for the past 72 hours, no muscle movement, no brain activity, no change in vitals. It's just sitting there." Graves narrowed his eyes. It was never that simple. "Then why does it still feel like it's watching us?" The guards exchanged uneasy glances. No one spoke, because they all felt it too. Even through the layers of security beyond the reinforced steel, through the flickering security monitors, it was watching. The prisoner inside Cell 99, the air was different. Still, heavy, wrong. Strapped to an anti-gravity chair, surrounded by rings of magnetic pulses designed to suppress movement, X-99 remained unmoving. Its skin was black like the void, shifting with patterns that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Its eyes, if they were even eyes, were like twin abysses, reflecting nothing back. For years it had remained silent, unresponsive, unmoving. But what they didn't know, what they had never considered, it wasn't asleep. It had been waiting, and tonight it was awake. The incident. A warning klaxon screamed through the facility. Red lights flashed, monitors glitched, and static filled the radios. "What the hell is happening?" Graves shouted over the alarms. The technician's face went pale. The biometric scanners, I don't understand." Graves grabbed him by the collar. "Say it!" The tech swallowed. His voice was barely a whisper. "It's moving." Boom! The facility shook. Metal groaned. Something inside Cell 99 was shifting. Graves turned to the security monitors. What he saw made his blood run cold. X-99 was standing. The restraints were still active. They hadn't been broken. It had simply stood up, like the laws of physics didn't apply to it anymore. And then, for the first time in 15 years, it smiled. The escape begins. The alarm screamed louder, a piercing, unnatural sound. Graves' heart pounded in his chest as he watched the impossible unfold on the security feed. X-99 was moving, not jerking, not struggling, just standing there, as if the restraints had never existed in the first place. It wasn't supposed to be possible. The electromagnetic fields, the gravity locks, the classified layers of containment tech, all designed to neutralize any biological threat. But X-99, it wasn't biological, not by Earth standards. "Shut it down! Shut everything down!" Graves barked, his voice barely cutting through the chaos. The technician's hands flew across the control panel, desperately overriding the containment system. But then, all the lights went out. Darkness swallowed the entire facility. For a moment, nothing but the alarms and the sound of panicked breathing filled the air. And then, they heard it. A deep, reverberating clicking noise, echoing through the prison halls. A sound that wasn't human. A sound that wasn't from Earth. The thing in the dark. Night vision! Now, Graves ordered, gripping his rifle as his HUD display flickered to life. The security team's visors bathed the hallway in eerie green light, enough to reveal the nightmare unfolding before them. A shadow moved, fast, unnatural. It wasn't running, it was gliding. X-99 wasn't bound by gravity anymore. One of the guards screamed, opening fire. Automatic gunfire ripped through the hallway, but it hit nothing. The bullets passed right through. "What the hell?" another soldier shouted, reloading with shaking hands. And then X-99 stepped into view. Its body was shifting, constantly changing, its silhouette distorting like it wasn't fully part of this reality. But the worst part? Its face. It was smiling, but not in any way a human should smile. The curve was too sharp, the expression too knowing, like it had been waiting for this. "Fall back," Graves barked, dragging a frozen soldier back into formation. But it was already too late. The slaughter. X-99 moved. 1 second it was at the end of the hall. The next, it was right there. "Contact!" Graves shouted, firing at point-blank range. The bullets hit, but they didn't matter. The creature's body absorbed them, shifting around the impacts like liquid shadow. Then it lashed out, a single movement. The first soldier never even screamed. His body exploded, torn apart in a way that defied physics, ripped into ribbons in a fraction of a second. Blood splattered against the steel walls. Then another. One by one, the squad fell, until only Graves remained. Silence. Thick, heavy, wrong. He gripped his rifle tighter, breathing heavily. His entire team, was gone. In under 30 seconds, his HUD flickered. Static crawled through the earpiece, and then a voice, but not human, a whisper that slithered into his mind like a disease. "You were never in control." Graves froze. His body refused to move. The air around him felt wrong, like reality itself was twisting. And then for the first time in 15 years, X-99 took its first step forward, towards him. The last man standing, Graves' hands trembled against the grip of his rifle. He had fought in war zones. He had seen the worst of human depravity, but nothing had ever made him feel this helpless. X-99 was walking toward him, not running, not charging, just walking. And somehow that was worse. Graves forced himself to move. His boots scraped against the blood-slick floor as he backpedaled, rifle aimed center mass. "Stop!" he roared. "Stand down!" The creature didn't even acknowledge him. It simply kept walking, its form shifting, distorting like it wasn't fully locked into this reality. Graves squeezed the trigger, a full magazine. The bullets ripped through X-99's body. But again, it didn't matter. The thing absorbed the rounds, its flesh rippling like liquid shadow, then expelling them, the flattened bullets clattering to the ground like discarded debris. No damage, no reaction. It was playing with him. Graves gritted his teeth. Fine. If bullets didn't work, he threw a grenade. Boom! The hallway shook as flames and shrapnel tore through the air. Smoke flooded the space. Graves hit the ground, rolling behind a steel barrier, gripping his rifle so hard his knuckles turned white. Silence. Was it over? The smoke cleared, and there it was, standing exactly where it had been, untouched and smiling. The horrors of Level 7. Graves didn't wait. He turned and ran. His boots pounded against the reinforced steel floor, his breath ragged as he sprinted down the empty corridor. He had to get to Level 7. There was a fail-safe, a last resort. If he could seal the blast doors, he could trap X-99 inside the containment wing. Maybe buy some time, or at least die knowing he tried. He reached the emergency access panel, slamming his ID badge against the scanner. Access denied. What? Graves slammed the badge again. Access denied. No, no, no! A voice crackled over his comms. Captain Graves! He froze. The voice was distorted, layered with static. Wrong. It wasn't from command. It wasn't even from a human. Why do you run? A chill crept up his spine. Graves turned, raising his rifle. X-99 was gone. The hallway was empty, just the distant flickering of broken lights, the hum of emergency alarms, and the smell of blood. His ears rang. You were never in control. It whispered from everywhere. The thing behind the door. A sudden bang shook the steel blast door ahead of him. Graves' heart jumped into his throat. Then, another bang, louder. The metal dented inward. Something was hitting it. Something big. Boom! A third hit. The entire hallway shook. The thick, reinforced titanium door, designed to withstand nuclear attacks, was bending. Then Graves realized X-99 wasn't the only thing they had locked away. Level 7 wasn't just a containment wing. It was a graveyard for things that should have never existed. And now something wanted out. The impossible choice. Captain Graves, that voice again. It wasn't from the comms anymore. It was inside his head. X-99 was infiltrating his mind. You can open the door. His hands moved, not by his own will. He reached for the terminal. He was going to open it. His own body was betraying him. Graves clenched his jaw, fighting the urge. He forced his arm back. They are watching. He shook his head. No, you are nothing but an experiment. No, there is no escape. Graves screamed and slammed his fist into the console. The system overloaded, and the screen went black. Silence. Then, laughter, but not human laughter. Something ancient, something hungry, and for the first time since he had woken up that morning. Graves realized he was never supposed to survive this. The door must not open. The silence was suffocating. Graves stood there, his own heartbeat the only sound he could hear. His hands still hovered over the dead console. The door was still shut, for now, but whatever was on the other side wasn't giving up. A deep, guttural scraping noise echoed from behind the reinforced steel, like something massive was dragging itself across the floor. Then came the whispers. Software twisting, not in English, not in any language Graves had ever heard. The voices spoke in an impossible chorus, layered on top of each other like an endless nightmare. Then, boom! Another hit. The blast door buckled inward, like it was nothing but tinfoil. The walls shook with an unnatural tremor. This wasn't brute force. It was deliberate, intelligent. They weren't just trying to break out. They were testing the structure, and they were winning. X-99 is playing with you. Graves took a step back. His mind screamed for him to run. But where? There was nowhere left. And then, a shadow flickered at the far end of the hall. Slow, unnatural. X-99. It was standing perfectly still. Its obsidian-like skin shifted and crawled, as if it wasn't one form, but many trapped inside a living nightmare. You cannot stop what is coming. The voice slithered into his mind. Graves clamped his hands over his ears, but it didn't help. The words weren't coming from the outside. They were inside him. You were never in control. The whispers grew. Graves gritted his teeth and raised his rifle. Point blank. No hesitation. He fired. A direct hit. The round went through its skull, but instead of dropping, X-99 grinned. Graves's blood ran cold. You think this body is me? And then, the corpse collapsed. Like a discarded puppet, a husk, empty. The real X-99 was never there. Level 7 has been breached. The blast door groaned. Then, it folded inward like paper. A mass pushed its way through. Graves couldn't comprehend what he was seeing. It wasn't one thing. It was many, twisting, growing, a writhing horror of shifting limbs and hollow faces, contorted in endless agony. Their mouths moved, but no sound came out. Instead, a single voice whispered inside his skull. "You let us out!" Graves' breath hitched. His legs wanted to collapse. It was too much. The air around the thing crackled. Lights flickered, then died completely. A black void swallowed the corridor. The emergency alarms failed. The facility was dead. And in the absolute suffocating darkness, the whispers became laughter. Graves didn't think. He ran, but he already knew. There was no escape. They were never prisoners. The hall stretched endlessly. Graves didn't know if it was real or if the facility itself was warping. His head pounded. His thoughts weren't his own anymore. They were inside him, memories that weren't his, worlds that weren't Earth, something far older than mankind itself. They weren't prisoners. They had never been trapped. They had been waiting, and now they were free. Graves stumbled, his vision blurred. Then, the last emergency light flickered to life, just enough to show what stood in front of him. X-99. Not a projection, not a husk. The real thing. And it was smiling. "You did well, Captain. They are inside you." Graves couldn't breathe. His lungs felt crushed, like an unseen force was squeezing the air from his body. X-99 stood there, watching him. It was no longer just an entity. It was something beyond understanding. Its hollow eyes, deep as an abyss, reflected something worse than death. The absence of self. "You understand now," the voice slithered into his mind. Graves staggered back, his rifle trembling in his grip. "You were never meant to contain us." The words weren't spoken. They were felt, like a cold, crawling thing slithering through his skull. Memories that weren't his flashed behind his eyes. A universe drowning in silence. Worlds consumed by shadows that left behind only hollow echoes. "You thought this facility was a prison." The voice twisted into something that almost sounded amused. "But it was never for us. It was for you." There were never guards, only prisoners. The walls shuddered, bending as if they were alive. The alarms were dead, but Graves could still hear it. A deafening hum vibrating in his bones. Then, the lights flickered. For half a second, Graves saw the hallway behind X-99, and his stomach dropped. The bodies were gone, the soldiers, the scientists, everyone who had died. Their corpses had vanished. The only thing left was black residue, pulsating like breathing flesh. They belonged to us now. X-99 took a step closer. Graves raised his weapon. He fired. Point blank. The bullet ripped through X-99's skull. But it did nothing. The entity didn't react. Instead, it laughed. A deep, endless void of sound that cracked reality itself. Then, the wall behind it peeled open like rotting flesh. A doorway, leading to somewhere else. Somewhere that wasn't Earth. And Graves knew, if he looked inside, he would never come back. The other side. "You were never protecting humanity from us," X-99 said. "You were protecting yourselves from what's beyond." Graves's breath hitched. The doorway expanded. A thick, black mist spilled into the corridor. And inside was nothing. Not darkness, not emptiness. Just a vast, infinite void where things moved without form and whispered without mouths. His mind screamed not to look, but it was too late. It was already inside him. His hands trembled. His heartbeat slowed. The pulse of the universe itself pushed against his skull. "Come, Captain Graves." The voices were everywhere. "See what was buried." The last transmission. Somewhere far above, on the surface, the last operational console flickered online. A security camera sparked to life. And in that single flickering frame, the command center caught its final recording of the lowest level in the facility, Graves, standing at the threshold of something unspeakable. X-99 behind him, and the doorway to another world. Wide open. The video ended. A single text warning flashed across the monitor. The prisoner is not escaping. It's inviting us in. The edge of sanity. Graves stood frozen. The doorway pulsed, rippling like a living wound in reality. The mist was thick, oily tendrils slithering across the ground like blind serpents. Beyond it, the void shifted. Not empty, not silent, but filled with whispers. Words spoken in 1,000 overlapping tongues. Some sounded human, some did not. X-99 watched him, head tilted unnaturally. "You have already stepped across, Captain Graves." The voice didn't come from X-99. It came from inside Graves' own mind. "You just haven't realized it yet. The other prisoners from the void, they came. Not walking, not crawling, drifting. Shapes too large to exist, yet somehow squeezing through. Some bore fragments of human form, a twisted leg, an arm ending in too many fingers. Others were unrecognizable, not creatures, concepts, living shadows of things that should never be seen. And in their midst, the missing bodies, the soldiers, the scientists. Their forms stretched, distorted, faces frozen in silent screams. Their flesh melted into the void, as if they had never truly belonged to this world. Graves staggered back. A familiar voice whispered, "Graves!" His blood turned to ice. He knew that voice. "Help me!" Mendoza, the rookie who died in his arms. Graves spun around. There, standing just at the edge of the mist, was Mendoza, but it wasn't him. His eyes were wrong, too deep, too black. And when he smiled, his teeth were not human. The infected. "They are inside you." Graves jerked backward, panting. The whispers were growing louder. His thoughts were fracturing. He gripped his rifle tightly, fighting the pull of the void. "No, this isn't real." X-99 laughed. "Reality is such a fragile thing." Graves felt something moving inside him, a slow, crawling sensation under his skin, like fingers pressing from the inside out, a pressure against his skull. His own reflection flickered in the glassy mist, and for a split second, he saw his own face shifting, his eyes darkening, his mouth mouthing words he wasn't speaking. They were already inside him. The warning that never came far above, on the surface. The emergency response team finally arrived. The blast doors to the facility were sealed, but the entire base felt wrong. Dead silent. No response from the security teams. The comms operator hesitated, fingers hovering over the console. Then, the surveillance feed flickered. A grainy black and white image of the lower level appeared. The command center. A man stood alone. Captain Graves, his back to the camera. He wasn't moving. The door to the void stood open before him, and in the darkness beyond, something moved. It was watching the camera, watching them, and then the feed cut to black. A single message blinked on screen. "Do not open the door. It's already too late." The contamination spreads. The emergency response team broke through the surface entrance. Their boots clanked against the metal flooring, weapons raised, scanning for movement. The lights flickered. No bodies, no blood, just silence. "Command, this is Fire Team Echo 1. We've breached the main corridor. No contact. Facility appears abandoned. Over." Static. Then, "Leave. Now." A voice came through the radio. Captain Graves' voice. But it wasn't him. Something about it felt wrong, like a voice spoken from inside a broken radio. "Captain?" Echo 1's leader hesitated. "Are you in command center? We're coming to extract." "No." The voice warped into something else, something inhuman. Then the alarms blared. A lockdown sequence activated. The doors slammed shut behind them. The lights flickered again, and suddenly, they were not alone. The infected soldiers down the hallway. Shadows moved. Echo 1 raised their rifles. "Movement! Identify!" Shapes emerged from the flickering corridor. Soldiers wearing U.S. military gear, but their faces were wrong. Their bodies twisted at unnatural angles. Joints bent the wrong way. Their eyes black as oil. Their mouths whispering words without sound. Then, they charged. The first gunfire erupted, muzzle flashes lighting up the corridor. Bullets tore through flesh, but the soldiers didn't stop. They kept coming, faster, smiling. A hand lashed out, grabbing a Marine by the helmet. Before he could scream, his body collapsed inward, like something had pulled him from the inside, like he had never existed at all. Fall back! Fall back! Graves makes contact deep in the facility. Graves stared at his reflection. His breathing was shallow. His eyes twitched. Inside the glass panel, his reflection didn't match his movements. A second delay, then a smile. Not his. It's getting harder to tell where you end and where I begin. The voice whispered inside his skull. He clenched his fists. You're not me. I am. Suddenly, the mirror shattered outward. From within the glass, a hand erupted. Not human. A limb elongated and covered in veins of shifting light. It reached for him. Graves stumbled backward, and then he heard the gunfire. The response team was engaged. They were too late. The last survivor. Echo 1 was decimated. Only one soldier remained. Private Reynolds stumbled through the corridor, his breathing ragged. His squad was gone. Swallowed, erased. He clutched his rifle, hands shaking. From behind, footsteps, slow, measured. He turned. Captain Graves stood there, eyes dark, expression blank. But something was wrong. Graves wasn't alone. Behind him, the entities loomed, towering forms, barely visible in the dim corridor, moving in ways the human eye couldn't comprehend. Reynolds raised his weapon. Captain? His voice cracked. Graves tilted his head, smiled. Do you hear them yet, Private? Reynolds took a step back. The air felt heavy. The whispers started, inside his own head. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. The final transmission above the facility. The military command center received a final distress signal. It came from Captain Graves. A video feed flickered on. Graves stood alone. Behind him, darkness moved, shifting, watching. His face was calm, his voice soft. This is Captain Graves. If you can hear this, it's already too late. His smile widened. We were never holding it prisoner. It was holding us. Then, the screen cut to black. The final protocol at Joint Command Center, red alarms blared. Satellite surveillance showed nothing. No movement from the facility, no heat signatures, no signs of life. It was as if the entire base had been erased. General, we lost contact with the recovery team. There's nothing but static on all channels. General Howard's jaw tightened. They had one last option, a kill switch. The facility had been built with a failsafe, a thermobaric self-destruction protocol. If triggered, the entire underground structure would collapse. Nothing would survive, or at least, that was the theory. Do it, Howard commanded. The officer turned to his console. Arm the sequence. Final confirmation required. Howard hesitated, then pressed the key. Inside the facility, the countdown begins. A robotic voice echoed through the halls. Facility-wide containment breach confirmed. Self-destruct in T-5 minutes. Somewhere deep underground, Captain Graves smirked. He heard it, felt it. They're afraid of you. The voice wasn't his own. It came from within him. He turned his gaze toward the mass of shifting darkness. What was once prisoner X-99 had changed. It no longer had a form. It was many things at once. A presence, a force, an entity older than the stars themselves. Graves felt his body convulse. They think fire will stop us. The darkness expanded, and Graves laughed. Reynolds' escape, the last human survivor. Private Reynolds ran. His boots pounded against the steel flooring. He could hear them behind him. Whispers, laughter. The walls were alive. Shadows moved like liquid, reaching for him. Self-destruct in 4 minutes. He reached the exit corridor. The emergency elevator was gone. Destroyed. His only option? A service tunnel. He sprinted inside. But then, a voice. You don't have to run, soldier. He froze. Ahead in the dim flickering light stood Captain Graves, or what used to be him. Graves smiled, but his teeth were wrong. Too many, too sharp. "Come back, let it in. It only hurts at first." Reynolds raised his rifle. He fired. Bullets ripped through Graves, but he didn't fall. He just laughed. Reynolds turned and ran. 3 minutes left. Above ground, the detonation military drones hovered over the site. The ground shuddered, an earthquake. Number something underneath was moving. The tremors grew stronger, like something was trying to break free. "General, the ground is destabilizing." Then, the detonation. A massive fireball erupted from the earth. Flames ripped through the facility entrance, consuming everything. A shockwave tore through the desert. Then silence. A black mushroom cloud rose into the sky. Nothing could have survived that. Right? The awakening deep beneath the ruins, where no human had ever gone. Something shifted, something ancient, something that had been asleep for a very, very long time, until now. The explosion had awakened it. A low rumble echoed in the void. Then, eyes open. In the aftermath, the phone call. 3 days later, a phone rang inside the Pentagon, a classified black ops line, one that was never supposed to be used. General Howard picked up. "Who is this?" A pause, then, "You should not have done that." Howard's blood turned to ice. That voice, it was Graves, but Graves was dead. The line cut to static. Then in a voice barely above a whisper, "You only made it stronger." The call disconnected. Howard stared at the receiver. The room felt colder. Something was very, very wrong. The final image. Somewhere in the vast expanse of the galaxy, a signal pinged. A transmission sent from Earth. Coordinates. A message in a language unknown to mankind. Far beyond the stars, something answered, and it was coming.